Welcome to another edition of Mixed Combat Radio. This is Matthew J. Hunter, and we had a ton of boxing last weekend. We also had a UFC on Fox 22 event featuring Paige Van Zandt versus Michelle Waterson, and I'm a huge Michelle Waterson fan, so kudos to her for winning the fight. And then the co-main event was Sage Northcutt versus Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall tapped out Sage Northcutt in the second round via rear naked choke. But let's get to the boxing first, mainly because there's just more of it, to be honest. So I'm gonna go through all the ranked bouts that were this weekend. And in terms of rankings, I'm talking about our rankings, the TBV rankings of the Thaboxingvoice. Number 10th ranked bantamweight Luis Nery defeated Ramon Tabugan via TKO in round 4. Hassan Adam defeated number 15 ranked middleweight Alfonso Blanco via first round KO. And we're definitely going to talk about that later. Number 3 ranked heavyweight Alexander Povetkin defeated number 11th ranked heavyweight Johan Duhaupas via 6th round KO. Number 4 ranked light heavyweight Joe Smith Jr. defeated Bernard Hopkins via 8th round KO. It was ruled TKO, I believe, by the Athletic Commission and the officials there, but on this show, we're going to refer to it as a KO because that's what it was. Number 15 ranked light heavyweight Solomon Barrera defeated number 8 ranked light heavyweight Vasilev Shabranskyy via 7th round TKO. Number 1 ranked cruiserweight Alexander Usyk defeated Tabiso Mukuno via 9th round KO. That was also Usyk's HBO and U.S. debut. So kudos to Usyk for coming across the pond. Number 9th ranked featherweight Joseph Diaz, a.k.a. Jojo Diaz, defeated Horacio Garcia via unanimous decision. Number 12th ranked light heavyweight John Pascal defeats Ricardo Marcelo Romero via 3rd round TKO. Number 6th ranked light welterweight Felix Diaz defeated Levi Morales via 7th round TKO. Number 3 ranked strawweight knockout CP Freshmart defeated Shin Ono via unanimous decision. Some other notable bouts we might talk about: Rashidi Ellis defeated Eddie Gomez via first round KO. Ronnie Rios defeats Roy Tapia via 7th round TKO. And Austin Pilate defeated Oscar Cantu via split decision. And those were really all the major fights. There was a Michael Soro fight, I believe. I don't think it was on the Alfonso Blanco Hassan Adam card, but it was in France, I believe. Yukioris Gamboa was supposed to fight this weekend, but his opponent had some legal trouble and had an arrest warrant out for him, I believe, the day of the fight. So the fight was canceled. So, poor Gamboa. But let's talk about Bernard Hopkins and Joe Smith Jr., mainly because Bernard Hopkins is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He deserves to sort of be talked about first, I believe. And let's just get it off the bat that his excuses post-fight for the KO loss kind of put a sour taste in all of our mouth, right? Like, that just... If that is the final one, and I kind of believe Hopkins when it is the final fight, the fact that he got lit up with a 4-punch combination, went flying through the ring, fell down, looked like he got hit by a bolt of lightning, and he comes and says, "Oh, my ankles got messed up. He pushed me out the ring." I just kind of sucks, like it just. Because Bernard Hopkins is a legend, like we can debate on the merits of his resume. We can debate on the merits of his fighting style, honestly, because it's not a pretty fighting style, and it's not like his whole career was awesome. It's not like he was in a ton of fight of the years either. Let's be real. But Bernard Hopkins is a legend in terms of what he's done the middleweight division. You know, he has the defense record, and they always say it's 20, but I know there's no contest in there, so I say it's 19. 19 title defenses that were successfully defended. With Triple G coming up behind him, and really, I think Bernard Hopkins is only behind Joe Louis in terms of title defenses. You know, consecutive successful title defenses. Because Joe Louis is at 5, not in terms of the division, but just overall in boxing. You know, Bernard Hopkins had notable fights. I'm not gonna say great fights because that's just inaccurate. Notable fights with Roy Jones Jr., Jermaine Taylor, Joe Calzaghe, Chad Dawson, even like the Kelly Pavlik fight was a huge fight. You know, I think it's gonna be interesting seeing Bernard Hopkins be a full-on promoter from now on. It's gonna be interesting because I think that role kind of suits him. I think he's always sort of like a Mayweather in a sense that they've always just been really invested behind the scenes in the goings abouts of their business and the business of their fight events. You know, like they've always been involved. When Bernard Hopkins was a very green fighter, he was heavily involved in the matchmaking process, that deciding what venue and all that. He's always been that type of guy that wanted to be involved with those sorts of discussions. And some boxers just aren't like that. You know, that's just like how some athletes can't be coaches. Like Michael Jordan's never gonna be a great coach. Kobe Bryant's never gonna be a great coach, in my opinion. You know, you get like the meta world pieces of the world, you know, being a semi good coach, you know, like in terms of just coaching other players. You know, so I don't know where Bernard Hopkins is going to go in terms of the heights of being a promoter. You know, is he going to be a legendary figure now in the promotional world? I doubt it. I seriously do, just because it is still Oscar's company. But, you know, kudos to Hopkins for a great career. Kudos to all the memories. Now let's talk about Joe Smith Jr. and where he goes from here. Because, you know, one of my good friends, Bruce from Pittsburgh, he one of the callers of the Boxing Voice, he talked to me about Joe Smith Jr. being potentially Fighter of the Year. And I thought that was interesting because I didn't really think about it. Both upset wins against Fonfara and Hopkins. Both knockouts. One was a top 10 guy, one was a legend. You know, this is interesting. I don't think it's Fighter of the Year, but I just think that his year alone has been interesting. And I think Joe Smith Jr. is set up, if he's smart, he'll go after a title the quickest way possible. He'll go after Adonis Stevenson. If he is smart, that's what he would do. You know, because again, because I was talking to some people after the fight, and obviously we had Sullivan Barrera knock out Shabranskyy, and we're gonna get to that. But the obvious matchup that seemed to make sense was Sullivan Barrera versus Joe Smith Jr., and the winner of that bout either fighting the winner of Andre Ward versus Sergey Kovalev or Adonis Stevenson. And I think, well, no matter the path for either of them, I think those 5 light heavyweights, man, they're fun. They're fun. You know, we definitely got to change our rankings. Because Sullivan Barrera, did such a good job against Shabranskyy. And I picked Barrera, so I was really happy about that. You know, and I think Joe Smith Jr. is kind of basic. I don't think he does anything exceptionally well. He doesn't have a great jab. He kind of walks into boxing range without setting up the entry. He likes to throw big hooks. They're not too wide, but they're not too compact either. So somebody with more compact, straighter shots can easily hit him before they get hit. Brian Hopkins was landing tons of shots. Not tons of shots, but he was landing shots on Joe Smith Jr. Why? Because Joe Smith Jr. does not have good defensive capabilities. He's a plotter in all intents and purposes. I think he loses to guys like Solomon Barrera, Andre Ward, Sergey Kovalev. Now, Adonis Stevenson is interesting just because I think he's not nearly the level of a boxer that a Sergey Kovalev is. I think Sergey Kovalev is an exceptional boxer. I don't think Adonis Stevenson is, personally. I think Adonis Stevenson has a great left hand and knows how to place that shot. But the rest of his boxing game is kind of mediocre, personally. That's just my, again, personal opinion. You may disagree with it. Now let's talk about the Jojo Diaz, Horatio Garcia fight. Now, I'm not really high on Joseph Diaz. I'll be completely honest. I know people that are super high on him, and people that are slightly high on him, and then there's people like me who thinks the top 6 or 7 of that division beat him relatively easily, and we're gonna go to our rankings right now and see who's ahead of him. And it's a tough climb. I think he's ranked, number 7 or whatever. So we have Joseph Diaz at number 9. So Jesus Saliar, Sampre Vetiek, Oscar Valdez, Lee Selby, Abner Mares, Gary Russell Jr., Leo Santa Cruz, and Carl Frampton. Whew. I don't see Joseph Diaz having an easy time against any of those guys. And then if you look at guys below Joseph Diaz, we have ranked Oscar Escadon, Scott Quigg, Josh Warrington's, mediocre, but I think Josh Warrington's the Joseph Diaz of the UK. What does Joseph Diaz do that's exceptional? And I remember, I think it was Max Kellerman or Jim Lampley comparing Joseph Diaz to Vasily Lomachenko in terms of power, and I thought that was just woefully inaccurate. I mean, Joseph Diaz, you can tell, literally puts everything he has into some shots, and they don't phase his opponents, really. At this level now, of the top 30 to 50 in the world that he's facing, it's not affecting them, So he's comparing that to Lomachenko, who just iced Rocky Martinez, who made Nicholas Walters do no mas, really? Come on, man. This is bad comparison, Max Kellerman. Bad comparison. I don't know what's his issue, other than just being bought over by whatever promoters currently paying him for that night. I don't know. It's just I don't see Joseph Diaz doing that great. He's a good southpaw. He does things well. He's good at almost everything, obviously except for his power, but he's good at almost everything. So he'll beat the bottom other 5 in the 15, right? The other 6 guys: Oscar Escadon, Scott Quigg, Josh Warrington, Jonathan Burrows, Jorge Lara, Mark Magazio. Those are all guys he can beat, right? That's why I have him ranked above those guys. But against Jesus Saliar, the guy ranked right above him, there's no way. I just don't see it. I see Jesus Saliar walking him down. Why? Because what does Jesus Saliar have to worry about Joseph Diaz? He's not going to hurt him. Saliar just went 12 rounds with Abner Mares. Abner Mares hits way harder than Joseph Diaz. But no, Joseph Diaz is the next godsend of boxing for Golden Boy and HBO, which I don't get. Because you have guys like Oscar Valdez. I know he's top rank and not Golden Boy, but they're both under the HBO banner. Oscar Valdez would wreck Joseph Diaz significantly. That left hook would, oh my God, it would hit Joseph Diaz so many times. You guys have no idea. Let alone guys like Lee Selby, who are just a better boxer I think the power is probably equal actually in that bout. Probably the least dangerous out of everyone, maybe except for Leo Santa Cruz. Abner Mares, I think, really tears up Joseph Diaz in the second half of the fight. I do. Mars's boxing is underrated, and he has seemingly more power than Joseph Diaz, I would say. Gary Russell Jr., I think, would be too awkward of a style for Joseph Diaz. I think Gary Russell Jr. would be able to counter his shots a lot, be able to dart in and out, land like 2 or 3 punches, dart out, keep his hands up because he has good defense. I think Leo Santa Cruz would probably just outwork him, to be honest. And I think Carl Frampton would just eat him up. Carl Frampton would probably finish him in like the 10th round, just from accumulation of just damage. Because Joseph Diaz is a tough guy. I will give him that. But Carl Frampton, Oscar Valdez are just stylistic nightmares for him. He may have fight of the years against Jesus Aliar, Lee Selby, Abner Mares, Gary Russell, Leo Santa Cruz, but he will get eat up by Oscar Valdez and Carl Frampton. Point blank. Now let's talk about the cruiserweights. Because I had a lot of my friends from LA not like Usyk's fight. And it was interesting because, I have some colleagues in the UK who are really high on Usyk, who think he's like the next guy, right? In terms of the cruiserweight. That's why, I have him ranked number 1. I thought the Glowacki outclassing was just something that deserved it, especially since we've had sort of a upheaval in the top half of cruiserweight. I think Usyk could easily be ranked number 1. And I didn't think he looked bad. But it was funny because the amount of, not hate, because that's a bad word, but indifference, a lot of indifference. And it was mainly due to the perception that Alexander Usyk was trying to be cute. I have a buddy named JP who writes for us sometimes. And, that I think his exact words were, he's too big to be that cute. Now, I replied with one of the most quote-unquote cute fighters that's ever been in Muhammad Ali, and he's, you can't compare it to Ali. Ali compares him, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. I'm not comparing him as a fighter or a legacy or the amount of skill he has to an Ali. But why can one fighter be a bad guy, taunt his opponents, dance, be cute in the ring, but another one can't? Just because you've never seen him before? Because that's what it really was, in my opinion. It was that a lot of people did not see the Usyk versus the Glowacki fight because it wasn't televised in the U.S. And 90% of boxing fans don't watch it if it's not televised. It's just a fact, especially ones like in Eastern Europe, where I had to watch it on a stream that kept cutting out at 10 a.m. in the morning, 8 a.m. in the morning. Most people don't want to do that on a Saturday or a Friday. They have stuff to do, especially here in LA. It's usually sunny here. It's not like it's snowing. So I don't blame them for that, but the lack of the lack of acknowledgement of their ignorance, and I'm using JP as an example of a fighter based off of a couple rounds or one fight, is just it's what casual fans do. Whether we're pundits or hardcore fans, because if you listen to this show, you're a hardcore fan. If you go around saying this guy is trash and you've only seen one fight off of him and he's undefeated and a champion, you can't say he's trash. You can't. That's just uneducated opinions. So what's the point? You know, what makes you better than Internet Troll at that point? Nothing. You know, I thought Usyk was doing a couple things that were, in my opinion, elite level that may not have been noticed. But since they were both southpaws, Usyk. So basically, if you're a southpaw and you're going up against orthodox, and your lead hands are basically almost touching the entire fight because they're right there, you know, you're not standing opposite of the opponent. You don't have that clear access for your jab down the middle and your right hand over their lead hand, right? That's what you usually do if you're orthodox versus orthodox, or even southpaw versus southpaw. But as a southpaw fighter or boxer, you're so used to fighting orthodox fighters where the jabs are constantly almost going to be, like your lead hands are constantly going to be colliding. So as a big, tall guy, he's used to not having the most effective jab because it's just naturally harder to have an effective jab as a southpaw. It just is, especially if you're used to fighting orthodox fighters, which most southpaws at his stage of progression, at only 11 fights in his career, pro career, they're not used to that. So Usyk, as the tall guy, is used to slapping away guys' lead hand and using that momentum to then jab off of that and score points. Now, I'm not saying Mukunu is more experienced, but I just think Mukunu was ready to adapt faster, especially in the early rounds. Obviously, it changed, I thought, just because Usyk started landing more and started realizing the jab was more open, that he can just throw it out there and then really follow up his shots because the jab was really open. But anyways, I digress. So Usyk really struggled with being able to get hit by a jab because he's not used to that. He's used to being the taller guy, the southpaw, going against orthodox guys, being able to slap away guys' jabs and parry it, or usually just the angle doesn't work. You know, like that. The idea of a southpaw versus southpaw is rare. Like that doesn't happen. There's a reason why some boxing gyms or some boxers have had to fly in southpaws for sparring partners because it's just harder to find. But I thought Usyk is the type of guy that he's just a slow starter in general. You saw that in the Glowacki fight, that he likes to really use the full ring, make his opponent try to walk him down, find a sense of range and distance, because he's not great at finding that fast. You know, some guys are great at finding their sense of their judgment of distance and range very quickly within a fight. You know, Anthony Joshua gets that down within 30 seconds. Why? Because he crowds his opponents and he throws heavy jab to the body and head to set up his distance and set up his range. Usyk doesn't throw those hard jabs. He's on the outside dancing. So, naturally, it is harder for him to find his sense of distance and range. But once he found it, he did relatively well. You know, like Mukunu is ranked in our top 15. You know, it's not like this guy was trash. You know, like I'll put it this way: Usyk beating Glowacki and Mukunu in 1 year is insane. Like you can make an argument that Usyk is fighter of the year, you know, but nobody knows cruiserweight, so that's why no one cares. But you know, I thought, you know, kudos to Usyk, and kudos to Mukunu. I thought he fought pretty well. You know, he had some severe disadvantages just due to size and speed and footwork, especially footwork. But you know, like Usyk would step on Mukunu's lead foot and throw like 2 or 3 punch combination, then push off Mukunu's foot to exit, causing Mukunu not to be balanced, not to be able to throw a counter shot. You know, like that's elite. But no one's really talking about that. Let's go on to... Yeah, let's briefly talk about the Alfonso Blanco versus Hassan Nadam fight. Mainly because it just popped up in front of me. Nadam, man. I counted this guy out. I picked Blanco. Blanco's undefeated. He was ranked. And Nadam coming off the loss in the Olympics just looks so bad. And he comes in the first round. 1-2's the guy. And Alfonso Blanco just face plants out cold on the canvas. Starts twitching. Kind of a scary scenario at first because you don't know if he's okay. As far as I know, he's fine. So thank God to that. But God, Hassan Nadam with the potential knockout of the year. And I'm not going to say like comeback fighter of the year, but he needed that win. So much like Abner Mares needed that win against Jesus Taylor. Like, we almost had two guys that were mainstays in the division for a very long time get kicked out, but they didn't. They came back and won. Now, Mares just did it through a 12-round kind of slight battle of attrition. Nadam put in a knockout of the year, against a undefeated prospect. So man. If I only had a clap, sound, that Nadam, man, whew, that was impressive. Okay, we're going to have to talk about this eventually, and let's just get it over with. Alexander Povetkin knocked out Johan Duhaupas in the 6th round. So, Permain Stavern was supposed to fight Alexander Povetkin in this bout. And Povetkin popped for osteosterone. I don't know how to pronounce it. Some sort of PED. And it's funny because I woke up to this news being on the West Coast, this fight being in Russia. Because the time difference. I actually woke up to a text saying Povetkin tested positive, Duhaupas is in. That's all it said. So I naturally thought it was going to be Permain Stavern versus Duhaupas in Russia. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how the crowd reaction is going to be. And then I got the next text saying Permain... No, I didn't get a text. I went online and I saw that Permain Stavern went home. And so I quickly realized that it was Duhaupas stepping in for Stavern. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, this is unreal. Like, this doesn't happen. Like, I can't remember a precedent for this, honestly. In any sort of combat sports situation, I cannot remember a precedent that's similar to this, where fighter A tests positive, and then fighter B goes home and gets replaced. Right? Like, I don't get it. And kudos to the WBC for pulling back the sanctioning on the bout. Obviously, I thought that should have been just clear as day. I don't know how whatever governing body is in Russia, I don't know what it is, whatever sanctioning body is in Russia that allowed this fight to happen, they should all be thrown in jail. And it's funny because I'm not the most anti-PED guy. If you follow me on Twitter, you definitely know that. You follow any of my work, you know that. Like, I'm just not that guy. I think there are big issues like weight cutting. And Antonio Roscoe passing out during weight cutting this last week has just not been talked about. But we're going to talk about Alexander Povetkin testing positive and this whole bullshit. And we know for a fact, like, come on, man, like, at least half of these athletes, and not just in boxing, but half these athletes in the world are cheating in some capacity. That's just a fact. If you want a complete clean sport without performance enhancing drugs, do you know what that would entail? 24/7 surveillance on these athletes, and the amount of testing on top of that would just be insane. Like, it just, one, the money is not feasible. 2, there's a issue of privacy and rights. You know what I mean? Like, I put it this way. You, who's ever listened to this show, you do your job, right? Whether it's working in a taxi cab, working in an office, working in a construction yard, whatever you do, right? If your employer came up and said, and not even your employer, you're an independent contractor, basically. You're not an employee. You're an independent contractor. Came up to you and said, hey, we're going to follow you around. We're going to have somebody on you every day for the rest of your time with this company. And we're going to drug test you every day. How would you feel? You know, like that. There's something about that if you're okay with that, then like don't even listen to this show. I'll be completely honest. Like, and people are gonna be like, oh, you know, don't split your base. I'm like, I don't care. Like that's just ignorance. You know, especially when we have a banned substance list that includes stuff like marijuana, stuff like cocaine. I'm not saying like those should not be ingested, or those should be. You know, that's a different topic for a different time. But those have no links to performance enhancement. You know, we have tons of substances on the WADA prohibited list or banned list that have no scientific or medical proof of a connection to either anabolic agents or any sort of performance enhancement. So, and then you had to, on top of that, the recent unveiling of the idea that all these supplements at like GNC and stores like that they're not FDA approved. Like me as a consumer, I can go down to the local GNC and there's one down the street. There's a mile down the road. I'm going to go a mile down the road, buy some creatine, and there could be anabolic agents in there. And I have no idea, and it could just be contaminated, right? Like, that could happen. And, in fact, that's going to happen more often than it's not. You know, so I don't know. I'm just not going to be that anti-PED guy. I'm not. Only because I think the system we have cannot be super harsh. Like, we can't, like, if we just keep the system we have right now and start banning guys for life, that would make ludicrous sense. Like, that would make the amount of sense that voting Donald Trump in for office would be. Like, it just makes zero sense. So, I don't know. It sucks because you see a fight like this and you go, obviously, that should have never happened. Povetkin should have never been in the ring. Hopkins should have never accepted that fight. And the sanctioning organization whoever sanctioned that bout, because it wasn't the WBC, whoever ended up sanctioning it, should all look upon themselves and say, what did we just do? Because in some places like Germany, if you take PEDs and you go into a contact sport, that's illegal. Like, that, you face big time charges in Germany for that. You know, I want to say it's like not like attempted murder, but it's like assault. Basically, they view it as that. Yeah, I don't want to dwell on this anymore. Like, it's just depressing. It really is. Like, it's just like, why did this even have to happen, Russia? You know, like, come on, really. On CBS Sports Net, we had Oscar Cantu versus Aston Pilate. It was kind of an ugly fight. Not like in a bad way, but like there was just, the styles didn't really clash in a way that was beneficial, in my opinion. So it'd be interesting. It was very close. It was one of those where I was like, even watching, I was like, this is going to be one of those fights where it's going to come down to a decision. And whoever loses isn't going to be happy. You can just tell. It was just one of those fights. I did not see the BN Sports Espanol card yet, to be honest. It's been a lot of boxing. You know, I watched UFC and kickboxing and all that stuff too. So you got to forgive me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm going to briefly talk about this because I thought it was pretty cool, actually. Jason Quigley from Ireland um, was on the HBO card with Bernard Hopkins and Joe Smith Jr., Alexander Usyk, and Makunu, and Jose Diaz, and Garcia. And there was a sizable, I would say, at least like 100 or 200 Irish fans with the flags and everything out there that obviously came across the pond. I can tell because they all had Irish accents, so it wasn't like they were just Americans. Like, they had Irish accents. I was seated right in front of them, basically. And, man, they were hyped for Jason Quigley. And he went out there and iced this guy, like, in a round. So, yeah, I mean, it was something to keep note of, especially in, the middleweight division, because the middleweight division is so bad that anyone can get some hype and some steam about them. And it could be a Gennady Golovkin opponent in the next 2 years, right? Like, that's completely possible. What else? I'm gonna briefly talk about what's coming up in the schedule because it's not much, and then I'm gonna kind of actually wrap up this episode because I'm gonna do another one later today about the unionization of boxing and really wrap that up. I know I promised that last week, but I got busy. Stuff happens. But this weekend, I believe it's on Friday. And it's not televised in the U.S. So, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You have to find some creative ways to watch this fight. Artur Beterbiev, who, what do we have him ranked? We have him ranked number 7th. But again, these rankings need to be fixed because, Solomon Barrera and Joe Smith Jr. showed a lot. So that needs to be changed. But Beterbiev is fighting this Friday in Quebec, Canada. You're going to have to find some interesting ways to watch that card. No one else on the card looks any good. And there's a lot of guys versus the dreaded TBA. And Beterbiev is fighting Isidro Renone Preto. I think that's a Brazilian name, actually. There's been a lot of Brazilian boxers recently. It's interesting. I wonder if that's just a side effect of Brazilian MMA becoming more Americanized or American accepted. So maybe he's just getting more Brazilian boxers. I don't know. Just a pure speculation at this point. And then we have the infamous, notorious New Year's Eve cards from Japan. And these are probably my personal favorites in the entire boxing year. Or just combat sports year. Because I guarantee you, I think Ryzen has New Year's Eve this year too for MMA. And they usually have tons of cards there for MMA in Japan. So something to keep watch. But we have Neo Inoue versus Keho Kono for Inoue's WBO junior bantamweight title. Akira Yagishi versus Wetaz Bisambian. 12 rounds for Yagishi's IBF junior flyweight title. Ryota Mayoda versus Bruno Sandoval. 10 rounds at middleweight fight. Excuse me. And Marotta is ranked, actually. He's number 12 in our rankings for the middleweight division. So it's probably somebody you haven't really heard of, but somebody that, again, could be a Triple G opponent in a couple of years. Who knows? So that may be a fight to keep eye on. And then the next day, we have Moises Fuentes versus Kosai Tanaka. 12 rounds for the vacant WBO junior flyweight title. That's going to be on BN Sports Espanol, same day tape delay. But that's in Japan, just so you know. And then the same day, but in a different location. So I don't know if it's going to be televised or what. If it's on BN Sports and it's the same day tape delay, I wouldn't be surprised if they just wrap all these cards up in once. I don't know. I doubt it, though, because there's so many title fights. But then we have Jonathan Guzman versus Yukinori Ugoni. 12 rounds for Guzman's IBF junior featherweight title. That fight is going to be awesome. And then we have Kazuto Ioka versus Stamp Ketanwat versus, that's going to be 12 rounds versus for Ioka's WBA flyweight title. Then we have Jezreel Corrales versus Takeshi Ukami. It's going to be their second fight? Yeah, second fight. Their first fight was awesome. It was just a little bit controversial. Definitely have to go watch it. That's a 12-rounder for Corrales' WBA junior lightweight title. Ryoshi Taguchi versus Carlos Canizales. 12 rounds for Taguchi's WBA junior flyweight title. And then that's basically all we have till January 13th on PBC on Spike. Ezralandi Laura versus Yuri Foreman. So if you are a big boxing fan and you want to get the last little bit of boxing left before this year's up, it's pretty much on New Year's Eve. God, that Laura Foreman fight's just awful. And then they have Anthony Durrell versus Norbit Nemispati. I never even heard of that guy. God, man, PBC. It's weird because PBC has an awesome slate on Showtime, obviously. Because the next day, literally the next day on Showtime is Badou Jack versus James DeGale and Jose Pedraza versus Gervonta Davis. And those two fights alone, I think, are awesome. And you got Thomas Dolomieu on the undercard. What? Krytrov? Oh, that's a good card, actually. So, anyways, I will be back later today to talk about the unionization of boxing and finally wrap that up with a nice little bow for Christmas for you guys, because I know that's very complicated. I know that even if you guys listen to the interview of Lucas Middlebrook, it's a lawyer talking. So that's a little bit hard to understand sometimes. So I'm definitely gonna do that later today and wrap that up. So y'all have a great Monday, this December 19th, 2016. Hope you guys enjoyed this last weekend of boxing, and I hope you guys stay tuned for tonight's episode. Peace.